Ethan Vance adjusted the brim of his worn leather hat as he approached the weathered wooden buildings that comprised the frontier outpost. Dust swirled around his boots with each deliberate step, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the rutted ground. His weathered face bore the marks of a man who had seen too much violence, too much betrayal, yet his gray eyes remained sharp and determined. The Colt revolver at his hip felt familiar against his leg, a constant reminder of the justice he sought to deliver. The outpost appeared unremarkable to casual observers, a collection of ramshackle structures that seemed to serve the basic needs of travelers and traders passing through this remote corner of the territory. But Ethan knew better. Beneath the facade of legitimate commerce lay a network of corruption and human misery that stretched its tentacles far beyond this isolated settlement. For months, he had gathered intelligence, followed leads, and pieced together fragments of evidence that painted a horrifying picture of systematic abduction, exploitation, and murder. The proprietor of this establishment, a heavy-set man named Garrett Mills, emerged from the main building as Ethan tied his horse to the hitching post. Mills wore the practiced smile of a businessman accustomed to greeting potential customers, but Ethan detected the calculating gleam in his small, pig-like eyes. The man's hands were soft and pale, unmarked by honest labor, yet his forearms bore old scars that suggested a violent past carefully concealed beneath his current respectable veneer. "Welcome to Mills' trading post, stranger," the proprietor called out, his voice carrying an oily friendliness that made Ethan's skin crawl. "What brings you to our humble establishment? Perhaps you're in need of supplies, or maybe seeking some female companionship for the lonely trail ahead." Ethan nodded slowly, playing the role he had rehearsed during the long ride to this god-forsaken place. "I've heard tell that a man can find quality merchandise here if he's willing to pay a fair price." He let his gaze wander meaningfully toward the smaller building behind the main structure, where he knew the women were kept under guard. Mill's smile widened, revealing yellowed teeth that matched his predatory nature. "Indeed, my friend, indeed. I pride myself on maintaining only the finest selection. Come, let me show you what's available." He gestured toward the rear building with a flourish that barely concealed his eagerness to make another sale. As they walked across the dusty yard, Ethan's trained eye cataloged every detail of the compound's layout. Guard positions, escape routes, weapon placements, all information that would prove crucial when the time came to act. The air itself seemed heavy with menace, as if the very ground beneath their feet had absorbed the suffering of countless victims who had passed through this place of horrors. Inside the dimly lit structure, Ethan's jaw tightened at the sight that greeted him. A dozen women sat or lay on rough wooden platforms, their eyes reflecting various stages of despair, defiance, and resignation. Most appeared to be indigenous, their traditional clothing replaced by simple cotton dresses that marked them as property rather than human beings. The younger women huddled together for comfort, while the older ones maintained a dignified silence that spoke of inner strength unbroken despite their circumstances. It was then that Ethan's gaze fell upon her, a woman whose bearing immediately distinguished her from the others. Zara sat upright on her platform, her dark eyes alert and unwavering as she studied the newcomers. Her Kiowa heritage was evident in her high cheekbones and the proud set of her shoulders, but more than her physical appearance, it was her obvious intelligence and barely contained fury that caught Ethan's attention. Unlike the others, she showed no fear, only a calculating assessment of the situation that mirrored his own tactical thinking. Mills noticed his interest immediately. "Ah, you have excellent taste, my friend. That one there is quite special, a warrior's daughter from one of the Kiowa bands. She's been resistant to her new circumstances, shall we say, but that only adds to her appeal for the right buyer. Of course, her price reflects her unique qualities." Ethan nodded thoughtfully, maintaining his facade while internally preparing for the next phase of his mission. "She'll do nicely. What are your terms?" As Mills launched into his practice sales pitch, detailing prices and guarantees with the casual manner of a livestock trader, Ethan caught Zara's eye. For just a moment he allowed his mask to slip, letting her see the rage and determination that burned within him. Her slight nod told him that she understood. This was not what it appeared to be. The transaction was completed with all the legal formalities that Mills insisted upon to maintain his veneer of legitimacy. Documents were signed, money changed hands, and Ethan officially became Zara's purchaser. As they prepared to leave the compound, Mills offered his usual parting advice about managing difficult merchandise, unaware that he had just sealed his own fate. Once they were safely away from the outpost, riding along a narrow trail that wound through dense woodland, Ethan finally spoke. "My name is Ethan Vance. I'm not here to buy anyone. I'm here to burn that place to the ground and see justice done for every woman who suffered there." Zara's response came without hesitation. "I am Zara, daughter of Chief Running Bear of the Kiowa. I have been waiting for someone like you to arrive. That man Mills and his associates killed my brother and took me during a raid on our winter camp. But they underestimated what they were dealing with. I am not a victim to be pitied, but a warrior seeking vengeance." As they made camp that evening, the two survivors shared their stories and began to forge the alliance that would prove instrumental in bringing down the network of corruption they faced. Ethan revealed the true scope of his investigation, explaining how the outpost was merely one node in a vast criminal enterprise that reached into the highest levels of territorial government and military command. The mastermind behind it all was Colonel Marcus Albright, a man who wore the uniform of the United States Army while orchestrating crimes that would have shamed the most notorious outlaws. Albright commanded a regiment stationed at Fort Daniels, but his official duties provided perfect cover for his illegal activities. He used his military authority to conduct raids against indigenous settlements, claiming they were necessary for territorial security, while actually capturing women and children to supply his human trafficking operation. Zara listened intently as Ethan described the elaborate web of corruption that Albright had constructed around himself. The colonel had cultivated relationships with corrupt territorial officials, unscrupulous businessmen, and ruthless mercenaries who carried out his orders without question. His position as a federal marshal, a role he had obtained through political connections and carefully placed bribes, gave him additional authority to cover up his crimes and eliminate anyone who threatened to expose him. "Albright believes I'm dead," Ethan continued, his voice heavy with bitter memory. 3 years ago, my unit was ambushed while escorting a Confederate gold shipment through Apache territory. Officially, it was recorded as an Indian attack that left no survivors. In reality, Albright orchestrated the entire operation. He wanted the gold to finance his criminal enterprises, and he needed to eliminate my men because we had begun to suspect his involvement in the disappearances of local women. The ambush had been masterfully planned and executed. Albright's men, disguised as Apache warriors, had struck at dawn, while Ethan's unit was crossing a narrow canyon. The attack was brutal and overwhelming, designed to leave no witnesses alive to contradict the official story. Ethan had survived only through a combination of luck and the sacrifice of his sergeant, who had thrown himself over his commanding officer when the shooting began. For weeks, Ethan had lain unconscious in a hidden cave where his dying sergeant had dragged him. When he finally recovered enough to travel, he found that the world believed him dead and that Albright had been promoted for his heroic efforts to investigate the massacre. The experience had transformed Ethan from a loyal soldier into a man consumed with exposing the truth and obtaining justice for his fallen comrades. Zara's own story revealed similar patterns of betrayal and survival. Her band had been living peacefully on their traditional lands when Albright's forces attacked their winter encampment. The soldiers had claimed to be pursuing hostile warriors, but their real objective was to capture young women for Albright's trafficking network. Zara had fought alongside her brother and the other warriors, but they were overwhelmed by superior numbers and firepower. "They took 12 of us that night," she said, her voice steady despite the pain of the memories. 7 were sold to men in distant settlements. 3 died trying to escape, and 2 others remain at Mill's outpost. I stayed because I knew that someone would eventually come, someone who could help me expose these crimes and free my people. Over the following days, as they traveled deeper into the wilderness to avoid Albright's patrols, Ethan and Zara developed a comprehensive plan to gather the evidence needed to bring down the entire criminal network. Zara had used her time at the outpost wisely, memorizing names, dates, and locations while appearing to be just another broken captive. Her warrior training had served her well in this different kind of battle, requiring patience and cunning rather than weapons and physical courage. She had witnessed Mills conducting business with various customers, overhearing conversations about upcoming deliveries and payments to be made to higher-ranking officials. More importantly, she had observed Mills maintaining detailed records of his transactions, including correspondence with Colonel Albright that would provide irrefutable evidence of their partnership in these heinous crimes. The evidence was kept in a locked strongbox in Mill's private office, along with maps showing the locations of other outposts in the network and lists of corrupt officials who provided protection in exchange for regular bribes. Obtaining this documentation would require careful planning and precise execution, as Mills maintained armed guards around his compound at all times. Ethan's military experience proved invaluable in developing their strategy. He had spent years studying tactics and logistics, knowledge that now served him in planning what was essentially a covert military operation against a well-defended target. They would need to neutralize the guards silently, secure the evidence, and escape before reinforcements could arrive, all while ensuring that the captive women were not harmed in the process. As they prepared for their assault on the outpost, both warriors took time to honor their fallen comrades and seek spiritual guidance for the battles ahead. Zara performed traditional Kiowa ceremonies, painting her face with symbols of war and calling upon the spirits of her ancestors to guide her arrows true. Ethan cleaned and checked his weapons with the methodical precision of a professional soldier, his movements reflecting years of training and combat experience. The attack came at dawn, just as the guards were changing shifts, and their vigilance was at its lowest point. Ethan and Zara moved through the compound like spirits of vengeance, their coordinated assault leaving no time for organized resistance. Within minutes, they had secured the strongbox and were leading the captive women to freedom, the outpost blazing behind them as evidence of Mill's crimes went up in smoke. But their ultimate objective still lay ahead. Colonel Albright commanded significant resources and would not be easily defeated. He maintained a private army of corrupt soldiers and hired mercenaries, all of whom were implicated in his crimes, and would fight desperately to avoid exposure. The final confrontation would require all of their skill, courage, and determination to survive. The showdown came at Fort Daniels, where Albright had retreated after learning of the outpost's destruction. Ethan and Zara arrived with federal marshals who had been convinced by the evidence they had gathered, but they found the fort defended by soldiers who had chosen loyalty to their corrupt commander over duty to their country. In the climactic battle that followed, Zara's documentation proved as powerful as any weapon. Faced with irrefutable evidence of his crimes, including detailed records of his trafficking operations and correspondence revealing his network of corruption, Albright's support began to crumble. His own men turned against him as they realized the extent of his betrayal. The colonel met his end in a final, desperate attempt to escape justice, falling to Ethan's precise marksmanship as he tried to flee the fort. His remaining marshals, seeing their leader dead and their cause hopeless, surrendered without further resistance. 6 months later, the wheels of justice had turned with surprising efficiency. Albright's collaborators faced lengthy prison sentences, their ill-gotten wealth confiscated to provide compensation for their victims. The women who had been held captive were reunited with their families, their testimonies helping to ensure that justice was served. Ethan's surviving comrades from the ambush 3 years earlier received official pardons and recognition for their service, their names cleared of any suggestion of cowardice or desertion. Ethan, Vance, and Zara found themselves appointed as territorial law enforcers, their unique combination of military experience and cultural knowledge making them ideally suited for bringing order to the untamed frontier. Together, they rode out to face new challenges, ready to ensure that the territory they protected would be a place where justice prevailed over corruption, and all people could live in safety and dignity. Their partnership, forged in shared suffering and tempered by the fires of righteous vengeance, had become something stronger than either could have imagined. A bond that would endure as they continued their mission to protect the innocent and serve the cause of justice in the American frontier.